Good evening, and welcome to the next episode of the multi-award-winning FieroCast. First, I'd like to thank all of our listeners for making FieroCast the most listened to Fiero-only podcast in the U.S. Just a few weeks ago, FieroCast had received another award from Corporate Concepts. This one for Best Single Vehicle Automotive Podcast in the Midwest for 2025. So, as we move into this next episode, today we are going to be talking to Mera owner, Drew Monney. And for those of you that know him or know of him, he is the owner of the silver Mera prototype number 601. We will dive into that car in just a few moments, and why he decided to purchase that one-of-a-kind Mera. I am your host, Mike Croyer, and you are listening to the newest episode of FieroCast, the only podcast dedicated to the Pontiac Fiero and the Fiero community. You can find past FieroCast episodes at FieroFocus.com or on our Facebook pages. We like to thank our FieroCast supporters for this 2025 continued support. The Fiero Store, Rodney Dickman, Bonter Solutions, the Midwest Fiero Club's Golden Eye Graphic, the N.I.F.E Store, the Northern Illinois Fiero Enthusiasts, and Automodella. This episode tonight is brought to you by the Fiero Store and the upcoming Fiorama. Join us for Fiorama 29 for more Fieros, fun, and friendship. The 29th annual Fiorama is happening Friday, September 5th through Sunday, September 7th at Potawatomi Park in St. Charles, with events on Friday night and all day Saturday. Come to Fiorama 29. Experience the excitement.
We know how hard it is to find Fiero parts. We also know that as years go by, finding parts isn't going to get any easier. The big box stores will never make new Fiero parts because our community is just too small. This is why we need to support the companies that support us. For nearly 30 years, the Fiero Store has sponsored our club events, provided free technical support, and produced well over 150 exclusive parts that no big box store would even consider. So, next time you need Fiero parts, head over to thefierostore.com and browse through thousands of products that are specifically designed for your Fiero. That's fierostore.com, the world's largest source of Fiero parts.
All right, before we jump into talking with Drew Monney, I wanted to refresh everybody's memory about the Mera. The previous FieroCast dove into a little history of the Mera. And again, I just wanted to hit some of the highlights of the uniqueness of the car that brought it, unfortunately, to an end. So due to its limited production run and the circumstances of its creation, the Mera is considered a rare and collectible Pontiac. But is it really a Pontiac? The end of the Mera was tied into the cancellation of the Pontiac Fiero line, and the production ceased due to also a lawsuit from Ferrari. Time to welcome to FieroCast, Drew Monney and Mark Soldner. Drew is the owner of a one-of-a-kind, or should I say the only Mera prototype. And Mark is our resident Mera contributor and collaborator, and is co-host for today's FieroCast. So Drew and Mark, welcome to the newest FieroCast, and thank you for joining me tonight.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Hey, not a problem. Thank you. So let's start with you, Drew. What got you interested is not just in the Mera, but in cars in general, and what age did that start attracting you to it?
Yeah, my story, I guess, goes all the way back to when I was barely, toddling around. I actually have film footage of, Super 8 film footage of my dad shooting some footage of his '69 Camaro in the driveway, and then the camera pans down and you see me standing there just looking up at my dad and running around the car. And that car, by this point, this was the mid 80s, mid to late 80s. And that car was kind of the cool car. It was the car that was, cooler than any of my friends' dad's cars. And I think if I have to trace it back to something, my interest in automotive and just cars in general, it would probably be that. That's kind of where the love affair started. And um, I guess what got me interested in Fieros and Pontiac and specifically the Mera was my love of, I guess, just pop culture and exciting TV as I grew up. So, the two, I guess, shows and movies that I could point to there. One is Smokey and the Bandit, which I
Hmm.
know captured the hearts of a lot of Pontiac lovers. That's a big reason why a lot of people do love Pontiac and Firebirds. But then there was also a show called Magnum PI, which most people are familiar with, and Tom Selleck drove a Ferrari 308 in that. And say what you will about the 308, it was actually a very significant car for Ferrari. It was kind of Ferrari's big push into something that was a little bit more affordable for the average person. However, it's still way out of reach for the average person. But that show, exposed that car to, millions of people, me being one of them as a young kid. And that's where I kind of first learned about exotic cars and mid-engine cars and just the excitement that you get with that. And as I grew and started to understand that there was actually a Pontiac that was a mid-engine car that was pretty exciting called the Fiero, that captured my attention and just made me really excited to explore that. And, come, I guess, as I start to go down that rabbit hole, a few years later, I discovered the Mera, which was, for all intents and purposes, a 308 looking body that was put onto the Pontiac Fiero. And that just really captivated me. So probably within the first year or two of finding out about the Mira and the history of Bob Bracey and all the work that he had done with GM designers and sculptors moonlighting to help him bring that to life, I stumbled across there were a couple of listings. There was one on Craigslist and one on Hemmings, and I think the one on Hemmings actually pointed to the Craigslist post um, about the prototype, the 6001, very first, only 86 Mira in existence was for sale. And this was, I guess, maybe 8 or 9 years ago that I found this. And just thought, man, this thing is available. It's actually been sitting on the market for a little while, and nobody seems to be buying it. So I'm just going to call the guy that's selling it. So I picked up the phone, I gave him a call, and we chatted about it. We talked about Magnum PI and Pontiac and Fieros and Ferraris, and he was asking more than I could really afford to pay. So I threw out a low ball offer, and we met smack dab in the middle. I think it was it was a little bit off of what he was wanting, but he knew that I was really excited about it. And he had a new baby on the way, and I think he was kind of motivated to sell it. And so we worked out a price, and the rest, I guess, as they say, is history. I've been the caretaker of it for about 8 years now, and have just been trying to slowly improve it and drive it and enjoy it.
Did he realize what he had, or was it was
Yeah,
just a car to him?
no, he did know. He actually, I believe, was the third third or fourth owner. I can't remember. I want to say fourth owner, but he actually had documentation from the owners that had come before him. And actually the first documented owner is Bob Bracey, who was the founder of Corporate Concepts that built the exterior body for the Mira. That was a prototype car that they used on the show circuit. It actually debuted at the 1987 Detroit Auto Show on the auto show floor. He had some documentation. There was a letter from Bob Bracey to I believe the gentleman's name was Robert Rumian, who was a designer with GM who bought it from Bob. And then from there, I believe it was sold to one other person who then sold it to the person I bought it from. And he had a lot of that documentation. He had the letter. He had some like a Mera brochure and some personal notes from previous owners documenting the significance of the car. And it was actually listed online as the Mera prototype. It's just such a niche car, I think, that the greater car community didn't really understand its significance. So if
Yeah.
anybody didn't understand it, it was probably the greater community. But I'm happy to see that actually Miras are kind of in the spotlight. Doug DeMuro just did his quirks and features videos that he does. He actually just did one of those on the Mira, and so that's really, I think, going to expose these unique cars to a very broad audience.
Yeah, I've seen, I would say less than a handful over the last, 20, 30 years that I've been part of Knife. And um, they've been decent shape. People, I think, just they know what they have, but they drive it. But then, I first saw yours back at the 35th, and to me, it was like, it took me a second to realize what it was. And
Mhm.
then Mark was explaining to me, and I'm like, I didn't realize that there was a prototype out there. I thought they just jumped right into the body kits and were offering it.
Yeah, and that's the interesting thing. I think a lot of us Mira owners like to point out it's not really a kit because it was never sold as something that the consumer could apply as a kit. It was a rebody. There's a technical distinction there. This was a rebodied vehicle that was only offered through Pontiac dealerships. So if you wanted a new sports car, you could go down and buy a Corvette from your Chevy dealer. You could go to Pontiac and maybe get a Fiero or a Firebird, or some participating Pontiac dealers bought into the to selling this Mira, which was approaching the price of a new Corvette, but all you really got was the exterior package. So think, going down to the car lot and buying a conversion van, it was kind of the same thing. It was a
Mhm.
rebody, but everything underneath the body was still structurally exactly the same as the Fiero. In fact, it still came and sold with, the full powertrain Fiero warranty from GM. So yeah, they weren't sold in huge numbers, and there weren't that many Pontiac dealers that actually participated. And I think if the Fiero program had gone on longer than 1988, and Ferrari didn't come after corporate concepts, I'm sure that they would have sold many more.
Did you have to buy, or did you have to purchase a Fiero first and then purchase the conversion kit, or was
No,
the
no,
Mira
it was
as
a
sold
it,
as a?
Yeah, you ordered it as the Mira. So it was I think in some very rare cases they actually had one in the showroom, but I think Pontiac dealers would take orders for them. So I think the typical experience is you would go in, see a brochure, see some maybe some video on the car. There's actually a great video that's on YouTube that shows the whole conversion process. It was a corporate concepts produced video, and you would order it and it would actually drop ship straight from GM to Corporate Concepts facility, where they would pull everything, they'd pull the outer body off, rebody it, and then part of the way that they made their money was they would actually sell all those exterior components that they pulled off on the secondary market. So,
Mhm.
they were selling their service and their product as a rebodied Fiero, but then they were also selling off the stock that they pulled off of the stock Fiero.
So all those pieces that they pulled off of the stock Fieros were resold back to GM or given back to GM, or they
No,
were
no,
sold to
they
like
were
body
just sold on
shops.
this. Yeah, they were sold on the secondary market, so probably body shops and car parts networks, things like that. At least that's my understanding. There,
Mhm.
if anybody out there knows anything to the contrary, I don't claim to be the ultimate Mera authority, but I have learned quite a bit since I took ownership of this car, and I believe that was the case. Is that all those body panels and parts that were taken off were sold secondary market, not sold back to GM. GM
Yeah.
wouldn't have bought them back from, once it left the dealership, it couldn't really be considered a new part anyway. Or
Do
I'm
you
sorry,
feel?
once it left the
Yeah.
factory, I mean.
Yeah. Do you feel that they jumped into this late in the game after, I mean, with 300, plus thousand that Fieros that they sold, 200 under 250 Miras is that's a really low percentage. But do you think if they would have started back in 85 when they started looking at the GT and started earlier?
Well, I think so. I think what is, as far as my understanding of the history goes, it wasn't until the V6 option came to market and was really, known through the community, through the automotive community, that Bob Bracey, that was at the point where he really got the idea to do this. So once he found out that there actually was a motor that was going to be shipping in the Fiero that actually made it a sporty car, something that was, truly a two-seater sports car versus the two-seater commuter car, which it kind of started as. That's when he got the idea to do this rebody. So, of course, it takes development time to do that. So, even though they're not engineering the car underneath, there was quite a bit of engineering and design work that went into creating the body and creating the molds that they could then produce the fiberglass body panels from. So that whole development process took some time. And as I understand it, the 86 model year was really kind of the soonest they could develop a working prototype. And they put it on the show floor in January of 87. And you can actually see there's a photo that was given to me by the previous owner that I had purchased it from. And it lives on the internet somewhere, but I've got a copy of it. I've got a digital copy of it. You can actually see the prototype sitting on the auto show floor. It was just a snapshot that
That's cool.
somebody at the auto show took a snapshot, and you can actually see a red one just behind it. The prototype is silver, and it's kind of an interesting bit of history. The first Ferrari 308 prototype was built out of fiberglass and was silver. And then, the first Mera prototype is obviously fiberglass. All of
Right.
them were, and it was silver. But there's a red one, which a lot of people believe that was the first sort of quote production model. In the early stages, they were just sort of hand building both of them, all of the cars, figuring
Mhm.
out like what components to use. And in my car's case, it actually has real Ferrari side mirrors, real Ferrari tail lights. So, they were actually sourcing parts that would have been on a Ferrari 308 to give that a little extra authenticity as far as the look goes.
That's what I
And
was going to ask too, is how much on the prototype versus the production model, how much of that is would you consider original Mira parts versus like what
sure.
you just said, where they started incorporating on the prototype the Ferrari components.
Yeah, one thing that I love about just the car hobby, I don't like the expense of it, but I do love the connectedness of
Hmm.
the people in the community and the willingness to have these knowledge shares with people. So as I have gotten more involved with other Fiero and Mera enthusiasts, I've learned a lot. And I actually thought that my car not only had real Ferrari side mirrors, real Ferrari taillights, I thought it had a real Ferrari seats as well. And I actually learned from Rodney Dickman actually that the seats are not real Ferrari seats. They were actually just reupholstered to look like Ferrari seats, but you can tell with the headrests that it's a Fiero seat, but it
Hmm.
was reupholstered in leather and had the same stitching pattern as the Ferrari 308 seats. But as far as I know, I believe it was the side mirrors and the tail lights that were real Ferrari pieces. Very soon after, mine may be the only one that has that, but I had also heard some conflicting information where someone said that there were a few other models, the early models, that still had the real Ferrari components. But very quickly, once they started getting orders in, they commissioned recast tail lights, or they may have actually cast them themselves. I'm not sure, but they were molded to look like the Ferrari tail lights, but they had their own casting. And then the side mirrors, I'm not sure exactly what how long they actually used side mirrors from the same supplier. Um, that's a question I actually don't really know. So if anybody out there is listening, feel free to, give that info. Um, But the wheels that are on mine are actually pretty interesting. The wheels are made by Cromodora, which was a supplier to Ferrari. They actually made Ferrari 308 wheels, and in the Mera brochure, it actually looks like they have Ferrari 308 wheels on the Mera, but it actually turns out that for the purposes of that brochure, it was a plaster cast that
Hmm.
was made off of a single Ferrari 308 wheel and then duplicated and stuck on to the Fiero wheels. And a little bit further down the production line, that was when they decided that they wanted to actually reach out to Cromodora and have wheels that looked very similar to Ferrari 308 wheels, but with some slight differences to try and avoid, any kind of lawsuits. They actually started purchasing them from Cromodora and their own custom design. So my car would have not had that originally. It would have had the plaster cast stuck on just for photo op purposes. But eventually, before it left Bob Bracey's ownership, he had the Cromodora wheels put on it um, because that was his personal car for a while. So yeah, it is interesting. The badging on the back actually doesn't come from a Ferrari, and it wasn't created by a Mira. The Mira the um, letters that are on the deck lid on the back actually come from Grand Am
Okay.
badges
Yeah.
with the letters that are cut apart. The 2.8 liter V6 on the back, I believe comes from a Chevy Citation. I think it comes from some Chevrolet model. And then there's a GTS badge, which actually comes from a Chrysler LeBaron GTS. They so they kit bashed all these badges from other cars because I'm sure you could order those in whatever quantity you wanted for pennies. So that's kind of an interesting bit of history. So it had real Ferrari components and Chevy Citation and Chrysler LeBaron components as well.
So you kind of bring up an interesting point here. So, the Fiero store is a big part supplier for the Fiero community. Is there one for the Mira community? I mean, because with the numbers being so low, is there somebody out there that has, replacement parts, or does the Fiero store help out with that as well?
As far as I know, I have just chatted and kind of talked online in Facebook groups and Fiero forums. There's usually some sub forums that are all around about the Mira. So as
Hmm.
far as I can tell, any kind of mechanical component is going to be a direct replacement from a Fiero. So the Fiero store would be a place that a Mira owner could go for any kind of mechanical componentry. As far as body components and things like that, I don't think there's really a store for that or a central place that sells anything because it is such a small numbered variant. So from everything I've seen, it's just Mira owners and Mira enthusiasts that kind of, have an online swap meet. If
Hmm.
people have extra parts and they want to put them up and offer them to other people. Occasionally, you see people posting stuff up for sale. I've got eBay alerts set for badges. I think I've collected a few citation badges and Grand Am badges just to have as backups in case mine get damaged.
Hmm.
And actually, my Mira badge on my trunk lid, I still actually haven't put on. I need to do a little paint correction before I put those on because it was repainted at some point before I got it, and it's about a B minus paint job. So at some point, I am going to put the correct Mira badges back on. But the good thing about my car is it wasn't rebadged as a Ferrari, other than one little prancing horse emblem that was glued onto the back end. Other than that, they didn't replace all the door lock badges and the horn badge and the badge on the front with Ferrari. That in fact, the badge on the front doesn't look like any of the other Mira badges I've seen. This one says corporate concepts on it, which
Interesting.
later ones just said Mira. But this being the prototype, they were probably still just kind of sorting out what they wanted that badge to look
Yeah.
like.
Yep. So I had somebody ask, sorry. I had somebody ask a question, and I said that I would ask. And I said, I don't know if Drew would know this answer or not, but I'll ask. With the similarities of the 308 and the Mera, how how precise or can a 308 body fit onto a Mera body? So kind of going back to replacement parts. So like if a fender gets cracked, if somebody had the money to buy a 308 fender, can that bolt on to a Mera? How, and again, I don't know if you would know it. It's just it was a question, and I'm like, all right, I'll ask. I mean, it's an interesting question, but
Sure.
you know,
I can speak with certainty on that. 100% no. There's not the tolerant. Yeah, I mean there's definitely enough differences in the bodies that there would not be anything close to an exact fit. It would be way out of proportion, and gaps and clearance issues would be not at all remotely possible to make that work.
and I would
They're
assume,
actually
sorry,
go ahead.
and I would assume that's the case because of the space frame on the Fiero.
Well, that and also this car actually was sculpted by GM sculptors that were moonlighting with Bob Bracey at Corporate Concepts. So they actually created a clay model over a Fiero chassis. Um, so even though it looks like a 308 when you stand back from it, basically the A pillar, the windshield, the roof, all of that is still Fiero. And if you look at the two side by side, they're proportionally they are very different, even though they look very similar.
Hmm.
But it is interesting. I've seen photos, and I know Mark has seen the photos as well of that sculpting process. They actually had a Ferrari 308 in the studio at Corporate Concepts with the clay model that they were sculpting so that they could look at it and reference it. But they built those molds off of the clay model that was sculpted, not off of the 308, if
Yeah,
that
and
makes
that's
sense. So
it
they
does.
they
Yeah,
sculpted their own car to look like it, but it's a different car.
yeah, and it kind of goes along the same, philosophy in the design world that I'm heavily part of. And, somebody could have a logo, and then that logo that the a designer can shift that logo 10 to 15%. That's all they need. And then that logo becomes theirs. So, and there's
Yeah,
no
I don't know that that's legally. I mean, as we found out, Corporate Concepts couldn't continue to do this because the
right,
design was too similar. They thought that by changing it just a little bit, I think that they would be okay, but that clearly was not the case.
right.
And yeah, I mean, I think there has to be a significant change to the point where the design intent is different. And
So like if they would have
um,
kept the tail lights the same as the GT, making it similar but visually not similar.
Yeah, I mean, they could have definitely done something that had the same silhouette, but the big side scoops that cut through the door back into the quarter panel, that's very Ferrari
Hmm.
308. That's a huge design cue that would be very hard to argue that they didn't rip off from the 308. The sail panels with the louvers, the exposed louvers is another very Ferrari 308 thing that was lifted right from that. The trunk, the trunk deck lid, the patterning and the design of that, is very much the same. So they could have made a very good looking car that was very European and very sleek and very sexy, that would have been all their own. But I think what they really were trying to do was make something that people that wanted a Ferrari could go to their Pontiac dealer and buy and feel like they could fool their friends into thinking that they had a Ferrari.
Yeah.
But yeah, this was in the days too where people didn't really know that Ferrari was so litigious and would come after you and sue you if you made a kit that looked like their car.
Hmm.
There were certainly lots of other kits on the market that looked like other classic cars or other expensive, out of reach, in terms of the cost vehicles. So I think that they just thought, well, we'll just do our own version and, see how long we can get away with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
always felt that in negotiations and legalities and everything that if it would have been explained to Ferrari, or maybe they didn't care that it's actually like a tribute to them. And by buying a Mera isn't going to take away any sales from a Ferrari, because if you're going to buy a Ferrari, you're going to buy a Ferrari. You're not going to go, oh, this one's, $50,000 less. I'll buy that one instead. So I think it was just kind of an ego thing with Ferrari, really, like, oh, you can't do that. I mean, we don't want our car associated with an American car. But it was, I mean, I always
Yeah.
considered it a tribute.
Yeah, and I think that's a good thought. I think that that case could have easily been argued, but I think Ferrari's stance was that they want to protect their IP at all costs, and they consider their design elements and their design cues their IP. So whether you agree with the tribute side or the Ferrari side, I agree with you. People that were going to buy a Ferrari would have bought a Ferrari. They wouldn't have bought, the cheaper alternative. So,
Right.
if anything, when people saw that out on the road, they got excited about Ferrari. But that's
It's
not the way it went down, and that's not the way Ferrari saw it.
right.
How
Yeah,
much
one of the
did
big
the sorry,
notices
Mark.
that or sorry, one of the biggest thing I noticed with the differences between the Ferrari and the Mira is the quarter window. Ferrari has a real quarter window that you can see through, and all Mira has is that blacked out grill. So
Yeah,
that
and that rear quarter actually, that sail panel on a Ferrari actually splits. There's a part line, and the back deck lid actually is part of that sail panel as well. Whereas on the Fiero, it's just a flat deck lid that hinges, at the bottom and on the inside of those sail panels. But there actually was a kit called the Stinger that was created that is much closer to an actual Ferrari 308. If you look at that car, that kit next to a 308, it has that split through the rear quarter panel, and proportionally, they got much closer to the Ferrari 308. So there actually was a kit that people could purchase and build their own to look much more like a replica. But I think it's cool that the history exists, and so many mirrors are still around, and that people that have them do recognize their significance, because it is a very rare variant on a car that's becoming more and more popular. I think the mid-engine Corvette has just ignited a lot of excitement around automotive enthusiasts for American sports cars that are mid-engine, and it's made people remember, oh yeah, there was another American sports car that was mid-engine, the Fiero. So I think values are going to continue to rise, and I think younger people are going to find Fieros that they love and take care of, and hopefully restore and drive. And I certainly hope that's the case with Miros as well.
mirrors have become quite expensive. I remember when I first got into them, intrigued by them. It was back in 2009, 2010 when I got my Fiero, and I was looking at them, and there was one that I had my eye on for a long time on Craigslist. Started at 12 and it ended up selling for 8. I just couldn't pull it off at the time, but now you can't touch a decent one for under 25.
I was going to say they're almost right now. I think if not, they're back at the original selling price that you would get
Yeah,
from a dealer.
yeah.
Well, I am not known. You can ask anybody that knows me. I'm not known for my really great financial decisions, but I think I lucked into I had actually offers from people that were over twice what I paid for mine 8 or 9 years ago. So I feel like this is one that I actually got right just through dumb luck, and just wanting to have something that I thought was cool.
Did
Right
did
time, right
you
place, I guess.
yeah. Did you do a lot of like really dig deep into the research? Did you know you were buying the one and only prototype Miro?
I
And
did, yeah. Yep, I did. The seller knew what he had, and he had it listed as that. He had it listed as the prototype. And for whatever reason, I don't know if he was just asking more than the market, was prepared to pay, or what. But I think it had been listed for several months when I saw it. And he said that he had other offers, and lots of people had called him and talked to him about it, but nobody was, really serious enough to actually go through and buy it. And first thing I said is like, look, if we can just do a quick, video call, and you can walk me around the car and show me that it is what you've got it listed as, and we can work out a price, I'll buy it over the phone from you. That's one thing I have learned, is that if you want something in the car community and you see it listed for sale, more than likely somebody else really wants it too. So you've got to jump on it. And if you decide you don't want it, just resell it after you buy it. Because if you really spend a lot of time, debating whether you should buy it, somebody else is going to buy it.
Are you surprised that it wound up? Let me rephrase that. Are you surprised you were able to purchase it versus was there any thought prior to you purchasing it to donate it to a museum, an automotive museum, or put it in that historical marker kind of range?
Yeah, so right now I have it in my garage, and I've actually kind of vowed to get more involved in groups that, driving groups versus just classic car and car show groups.
Hmm.
So I am trying to actually get it out and drive it a lot more often. I did think a while back that I might want to reach out and just see if it would be interested, if anybody would be interested to put it into a museum. And I went up. I'm trying to remember what the event was. I guess it actually was the Fiero 40th show. We went over to the sort of sneak peek of the Pontiac
Yeah.
museum
Yep. Yep.
that is opening, and you'll have to remind me his last name, Tim,
Tim Dye.
the found Tim Dye. Yeah,
Yep.
I talked to Tim and told him, what I had, and said if you'd be interested in having this for the museum, not giving it to him, but putting it there on loan, and letting a lot of people see it and experience it, I'd be open to that. And I think he was grateful that I offered that. And he said, we're kind of covered up with cars right now, but let's stay in touch.
Hmm.
And it was after that that I kind of decided, if I am going to hang on to this thing, I need to drive it. It had been sitting in my garage for a couple of years and had only, I think, come out once just to, wipe the dust off of it, drive it around the block. But there's a great group here in Cincinnati that I have connected up with, and they do a lot of like little local kind of like one day rallies and different driving events. So I've taken it on a couple of those, and I learned the hard way that you shouldn't drive on nearly 15-year-old tires. I had a tire that it didn't blow on me, but it kind of the tread split apart, and a bunch of steel belts, kind of split out of the tire. But I was able to get that tire off and put the original spare on it, which had just enough air on it to get to an air state, a little air station at a gas station. And I'm currently shopping some new tires for it, because if I am going to drive it, I need to get some new tires. These are not
Yeah.
the original tires that were on it, but they were replaced quite a while ago. But yeah, I would totally be open to having it shown in a museum or a gallery, or somewhere that a lot of people could see it. And at some point, I'm sure I'll probably sell it. I'll probably I don't think I'll ever get tired of it, but priorities in life change and things change.
Yep.
And
Yep.
one day I actually would like to own a real Ferrari 308. So this is kind of my placeholder until that time comes. So if I ever get a real 308, it might be time to let this one go to somebody else who can love it and enjoy it as much as
Yeah.
I am doing now.
Absolutely. So have you had a chance to have the prototype next to an 88 Mira? And if so, what are some of the differences that they did between the 86, your 86, and the 87 and 88s?
The only real noticeable difference, as far as I know, is the wheels, like I mentioned to you. But based on when you bought the Amira, um, there are people out there like Rodney Dickman who would probably know exactly how many wheel variations came on them. But I know for a while they were shipping with body colored, painted body color wheels that were just the Pontiac stock wheels. They had the Chromodora wheels. There was a time where those wheels were unavailable, I think back ordered, and they actually shifted to a aftermarket wheel that was very similar, I think, to like the Testarossa wheel.
Hmm.
But they were third party aftermarket wheels. And there may have been one other option as well, but depending on what year you see, I've seen a lot of them online with the body colored Pontiac wheels. I've seen very few with the Chromadora wheels, which makes me think that maybe that was a costly option. That may have been something you had to pay extra for. The On the back end, the recast wheels, so the original Ferrari 308 tail lamps have the backup light, the white backup light in the middle of two of the four round tail lights. But the recast lights, that would have been too expensive. They wouldn't have wanted to do a dual color brake light. So I believe on the production mirrors, there two of them are red, the inner two are amber, and then inset from that, there's actually square white backup lamps. And I can't remember what vehicle those are from, but that was sourced from another car as well. And those flank either side of the license plate.
Okay.
So mine does not have those because they're inside the tail lamp, like the center of the brake light. Other than that, though, I think everything else is pretty similar. I do think the finish quality got a little better as time went. You can definitely tell mine I mean, they were all hand built, but you can definitely tell mine was a prototype. Some of the panel gaps are there's a lot of variation in panel gaps. Some of the louvers, like the little louvers that sit on the pop-up headlights, the louvers that are on the sail panels are pretty rough. It looks like they probably were getting close to being done and they ran out of time and just threw paint on it and cast it cast it as it was. And I
Yep.
believe some of that fit and finish improved as they went into production. But for a prototype, I mean, it's still a great looking car and all the details are still very nice. But I think they were able to improve just a little bit on some of the details as time went on.
Nice. Um, so going back in time, was the first time that you brought the car out to we'll say, all Fiero event, was it at the 35th in Peoria?
Yes, it was. I had only had the car maybe 2 or 3 years before that, and I had taken it to a few local shows, but I had not taken it to any All Fiero events before that.
What did you think of the 35th? And I think that was Mark's first time. I mean, he's been in, he's loved Miras for a long time, and I think that was the first time he, if I remember, you pulled up right at the front door, and I don't know if you were there or you were inside yet, but I know, that his eyes were just as large as can be when he saw that car and that trailer.
Yeah, I remember talking to someone when I was pulling in, and right in the middle of the conversation, I'm like, "Holy shit, that's a mirror coming in on the trailer!" And he's like,
And then
"Whoa!"
you found out not only is it a Mira, it's the first
Right,
one.
right. Because I did follow that car on Craigslist or whatever it was being sold on, and I just going, "Oh man, whoever gets this, lucky bugger." It's just like, look at it,
Yeah.
because mirrors being as rare as they are, 247. you know, and then one prototype. Yeah, jeez.
Yeah, and the reason why I think I was so interested in going after that prototype, I had some I guess prototype or first car envy. I have produced a documentary on a General Motors plant that was actually the birthplace of the Camaro and the Trans Am, and we're actually coming out with that just within the next couple of months. It's been a long process to get all the final approvals and permissions we needed for that film. But through the course of making that film, I met a couple of guys, a father-son team, Corey and Logan Lawson, who had, through similar circumstances, they just saw a posting for a 67 Camaro, and it said in there that the owner thought that it might be the very first one based on the VIN number. So they, called the guy, verified it, jumped in their car, and went straight there and bought it. And through meeting them, I got to see all the fun that they were having and all the excitement that people had when they brought this car that they had gone through a painstaking restoration to put back together in its original condition. Just the amount of joy that it brought to people as they took that to shows and told the history of it. I thought, man, how cool would it be to have the first of something, the first of some kind of car that's a popular car that has some kind of following. So when I saw I thought mirrors were interesting. And when I saw that that was the prototype, I said, well, here's my low cost opportunity to buy into something like that. And it was more than any of the later mirrors I'm sure were selling for. I ended up paying a premium for it, but you're going to pay more for the first of anything.
Right. What when you brought it to the 35th, what was the reaction like once people started realizing what it was?
It was interesting. I got into a lot of really great individual conversations, and I remember talking with Mark and several other people. I met there was a gentleman there that had another Mira that he had actually done a lot of custom work to that looked fantastic. I mean, it was a beautiful car, and I think he had named it the Pegasus. I think was the name he had put in it, but it was engine swapped with the 3800 supercharged engine and. It was, jet black, and he actually had a whole new interior that was very Ferrari looking interior put into it. But he was really interested in, I thought his car was super cool, but he thought mine was cool because it was the prototype. And, I got into a handful of just really great conversations and met some really great people. But, I didn't really know what to expect. I think there were a lot of people there that didn't know what it was, and they just thought it was, like a kit or a rebodied Fiero. But the people who knew and were interested in it, I got into a lot of great conversations, and everybody there that I met was very nice, and it was a very welcoming community. So that made me want to, of course, go back for the 40th, and I'm looking forward to the 45th. But yeah, it wasn't like I was a Beatle in the Beatle invasion or anything. I mean, there weren't screaming fans that were running up to look at it, but there were a lot of people that were interested in checking it out, and a lot of people that I think were happy to see it.
Mhm. Mark, after seeing it at the 35th and just your many communications with Drew over the many years, um, your knowledge of the mirrors gained a lot, I would assume, correct?
Yeah, I'm still learning all the time. I mean, like there was something I wanted to ask Drew about if you've ever heard of it. There was something on Facebook about Mira 8008, and it was for sale. And they said it had the custom corporate concept interior package. And I was like, I don't remember them offering an interior package. Was it just a sales thing that they were trying to pull? Or was there actually, because it was all that vertical tufted on the door and on the center console and, some other areas, which is really, kind of 80s looking. But I was just like, I've never heard of corporate concepts offering an interior package. Have you?
Yeah, I've never heard of that either. It's possible. I mean,
Hmm.
I don't consider myself to be the ultimate authority, but as far as I know, the most knowledgeable person on mirrors is Rodney Dickman. He has, really cultivated. He was the first one, I think, to really cultivate the Mira community and start to put together a central repository of all that information where people could access it and share information back and forth. And he ran a newsletter for several years and has a lot of the original documentation actually from Corporate Concept. So if anybody would know, he would probably know, but I've never heard of that myself.
Hmm. Yeah, Rodney, plus he had a certain amount of parts available for the Mira as well. Can't remember exactly what he had, but
Yeah, yeah, that's actually a good statement. I know you had asked Mike about the Fiero store and is there a similar place for Mira parts? And
Mm.
Rodney Dickman's store actually was probably the closest thing you could get. I mean, he of course sold a lot of stuff for just Fieros in general, but he did have some Mira specific stuff that I think in some cases he was manufacturing recreation pieces. but he also, I think, had gotten some stock from corporate concepts of various things. Um, but yeah, if I think it's unfortunately it's a private group, but there is a Facebook group that's Pontiac Mera owners and fans, and I'm ashamed to say that I just recently joined that. I've enjoyed the car and I've met a lot of great people, but I've not been the best at getting involved in Mera specific communities online. But I just recently joined that Facebook group, and the some of those photos I was mentioning to you, like the one that was on the '87 Detroit Auto Show floor, I posted up on there. One quick anecdote that's fun about that photo is that you can see in the foreground there's a Yugo sign, and in the background behind the mirrors there's a Nissan sign. And when the person who originally took that photo had uploaded it, or it had been reposted by someone, the caption of it was, "Look at some of the awesome stuff that Yugo was doing in the '80s," because people thought that this was a Yugo based on the signage. But the thing that really made that picture valuable was that um, I was able to find an insert in the Detroit Free Press paper by searching newspapers.com of the 1987 Detroit Auto Show. And it had a schematic of the auto show in this insert that showed where all the cars were being displayed.
Interesting.
It was like a wayfinding map, for people that were going to the show. And you can see right there in the diagram, it wasn't called corporate concepts for the booth. It was just Mira. But right in between Yugo and Nissan in the exotics and imports section, which is funny because the Mira was neither, but that's the market they were trying to appeal to. Right in between Yugo and Nissan is Mira. So you can actually, verify from the photo and this schematic that yes, this was that show.
Interesting. Interesting.
Yeah.
So you also have, I look at, this and you also have a feature article coming out in the September, October issue of Fiero Focus. And, I'm curious on your thought process because I take this interview and the article in Fiero Focus and, you know, your 35th and the 40th as reintroducing the Mira to the Fiero community, to the public, and and what are some of kind of just re-educating people on what the Mira is, and for me, this is I was not one to I've always liked the Fiero, but and I've liked, the 308s with the Magnum PI and stuff like that. But, in my head, it's like I never dove into it because I knew in my head I could never afford one of those cars. But then I didn't realize that Mira was offered back in the 80s, probably until early 2000s when it was, started talking about, but then it never really was talked about, but you know, this is educating me on the Mira, which I think this is awesome. I've learned more tonight and in the article that since I do the layout for Fear of Focus, so I read the articles before they are published, but it's very educational and I enjoy that.
Yeah, and I plan to continue to try and I'm going to try and bring out more information. I'm a video creator by trade. I have a small production company and I do commercial work and corporate video work, and that was what enabled me to do the documentary project on the GM plant, the Camaro and Firebird project I was telling you about. But as soon as we are across the finish line with that, I've actually already started laying the groundwork, not to do a full-blown documentary, but through a YouTube channel that I started to promote for that documentary, Original Motor Car. If you go and look on YouTube and just search Original Motor Car on YouTube, I'm gonna be posting loads and loads of more stories, automotive-based stories on that channel. Several of which will be focused on Fiero and the Mira specifically. Because yeah, it's an interesting history. It's an interesting car. And I think a big reason you're starting to see these things come, kind of bubble up to the surface is that I think in general, people are getting more interested in Fieros because
Hmm.
we're kind of reaching that point in time where there's a lot of newer people that are kind of getting into the hobby that are discovering them. People that were, that knew about them originally, are kind of rediscovering how cool they are and how you can actually, purchase a Fiero in great shape for not a huge amount of money. And I think that, as those values continue to rise and interest continues to grow, with the Mera being such a strange variant subset of the Fiero community, you throw in the interesting, styling and kind of the interesting story of basically like it's quintessential 80s. In the 80s, everyone
Yep.
was trying to uh, present wealth and opulence and decadence. So this was like the ultimate expression of the average person that could show off and show that they had something that they really didn't have. That's cool, but the fact that Ferrari came in and threatened a lawsuit to make them shut down, that's a kind of the icing on the cake of such an interesting history.
Yep.
And I've always felt for a long time, and I continue to feel that um, yes, like speed and performance and handling and driving experience is all great. And there is though that in and of itself makes cars desirable and collectible, styling and appearance and all that. But what really entertains people and keeps people's attention and gets people interested in specific models of cars oftentimes is the story behind that car. It could be the story of its creation, the story of its ownership, just the story of collectors that have saved it from despair and brought it back and restored it. It's those stories that make an individual car, or a group of cars, or a model of car. That's another thing that can make them very collectible and very
Yeah.
interesting.
Yep.
So I think the Mira's got it all, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. And just learning more about it, like I said, I've been part of the group that puts together the Pontiac Enthusiast Guide, and we touch in there on the Mira, but just seeing the in-depth history of it and just understanding now what a Mira is does make it more intriguing, and it makes it that much more unique too. And it is very interesting. So I can see why, the group that holds these dear to their heart is that way. So yeah.
And
Yeah.
one other thing I was going to throw out too that is kind of a fun anecdote. I've actually recalled a few things through this conversation. The first time that I learned that there actually were like attainable Ferrari replicas out there that were built on Fiero platforms and really kind of fueled my interest in it was I don't know if you guys remember like the American version of Top Gear that had Tanner Faust and Rutledge Wood. Um, though that series, I'm trying to look here and see what episode it was. There was an episode where Rutledge Wood gets a Ferrari replica, and he has to shuttle people from uh, some like resort area. He has to go and like pick up women and take them to this resort and make them think that he's driving a real Ferrari, or at least that's his goal.
Yep.
And it's a wheezing, not in great shape Fiero that has this Ferrari body kit. I don't believe the one in the show was a Mira, but it's such an entertaining episode that I started looking into Ferrari replicas and Ferrari kit cars, and that's when I first found out about the Mira. So that was, I think, a few years before what I had previously thought maybe was when I had originally heard about them. But you can find that episode on streaming somewhere, I'm sure. But it's a it's a very entertaining episode.
Yeah, I'll have to look that up because I've watched the original Top Gear, and those guys are great. And I've caught a
Yeah.
few episodes of the American version, but it's like I don't know. I don't think anybody could ever beat the original group. So, but yeah.
I agree. I look at them as two separate series. I
Okay.
mean, they share a similar name and a similar format, but nothing will ever replace the original. But that first American version is pretty entertaining. If you're
Yeah.
willing to say this is a different show, there's still some pretty entertaining stuff on it. Yeah, and Adam Ferreira was the other the third host on that. Tanner Faust, Rutledge Wood, and Adam Ferreira.
Awesome. Yeah, I will definitely have to look that episode up. So
Yeah, I think it was season two, sometime in season two.
perfect. So as we start to wrap up, again, a great learning, great talking, and just getting knowledge more of of the Mira. Uh, we do want to let everybody know that you are and will be attending this year's Fiorama. How like is this going to be again outside of the anniversary show? Will this be the first all Fiero show non-anniversary that you'll be attending?
I actually decided I'm not going.
Ah,
No, I'm just
damn it.
kidding. I'm
Ah.
just kidding. Just kidding. Just
I would,
kidding.
and Mark's
Just
face was
kidding.
priceless on that one.
Yeah,
No, I'm super looking forward to it. And in fact, actually on that Mira group on Facebook, somebody else reached out to me actually just yesterday, and I mentioned the Fiero Rama coming up, and apparently they have three Miras. And I think between him and his father, and I said you should come, and so I think he's going to try and bring one as well.
excellent.
So hopefully it'll be a strong showing, but yeah, I mean, I'm very interested in any event that has good people, great conversation, like-minded interests, and certainly all of the Fiero events that I have gone to, the 35th, the 40th, that it checks all the boxes. I mean, it's just a great time, and I know that I've got in some people's eyes kind of a significant special car. But I think one of the cool things about the Fiero community is just all the variation you see
hmm
in the cars. And, some are custom and people have done their own sort of, kit conversions and modifications. Some are completely stock, and it's always hard to beat just a completely stock car. I think in large degree, the studios at the big three got a lot of things right. And when people start doing too much customization, it can get a little far gone pretty quickly. But the thing that I think is kind of the biggest honor for me was at the 40th, I actually won one of maybe five, it was five or 10 John Chanella Judges Choice Awards, where he kind of went around and uh, identified the top Fieros that he liked personally,
hmm
and of course John was leading the Pontiac studio under for the Fiero development. So he's certainly a revered authority when it comes to Fiero design, and the fact that he actually picked mine as one of his favorites. Just made me, really proud to have it and really proud to be able to show it. So yeah, camaraderie and just like-minded fun and good times and the ability to show off the thing that you love and that you have makes me want to keep going back.
Yeah, and that's what I've always said this, and Mark can vouch for it. The Fiero community is not just car owners. It's not just a gathering of people. It's everybody treats everybody as their brother, their sister, and everybody is family. Nobody degrades anybody. Nobody says their car is, oh well, that car is crap. No, you don't hear any of that. You hear the stories. And that's what, the anniversary shows all are about. That's what Fiorama is about. First Fiorama was based on the daily driven Fiero and how many miles you can put on your car, and that was Fiorama. But we've changed over the years, and we do see a lot of those customized, those modified, the stocks, the rarities as the Mera and stuff. Um, but it's the stories that are told about those individual cars that just they live with you forever. And you are going to be participating on Saturday in a big Q&A, and I come prepared to answer a lot of questions because I think just like me, just the idea of having a one of a kind Mira there is gonna enlighten a lot of people. Being able to see it, ask a ton of questions about it, and bring it back in to, maybe a lot of people don't know that a Mera, is based off of a Fiero, but I it's you're gonna leave Fiorama knowing that you are now family to all of those people that attend.
Right. And that's the thing that I've been, ever since that I've been getting into mirrors and been trying to do is, and I noticed like in Pontiac, they have this huge thread called A Mirror in Paradise. And that's when I first got into it. I started reading I've read every single one of those threads through the years. And the Fiero is a community in itself. And I'm trying in a small way to merge the Miras into the Fiero family. They're Fieros. This is where you're going to be the most appreciated at shows. Is going to be a Fiero show because you are a Fiero. And the more I see them at the different shows, I saw one at the Indianapolis show on the 30th, and then Drew's, and I think those are the only two that I've seen up personal. It's always been pictures or videos, and so to welcome the Mira community into the Fiero community, even though you've always been part of it.
Yeah,
To
I
just
think.
Well, I certainly hope that there will be a strong showing of Miras that come. And you had asked Mark, or I'm sorry, Mike, about how I felt at that 35th show when I came. I did kind of get the sense that there were just a lot of people that kind of scratched their heads and didn't know what they were looking at, and
Mhm.
they thought, oh, this is, somebody's got a 308 kit that they've brought in here, and I do think that we are now getting, further down the line where people are realizing like, oh, this actually is a Fiero that was sold this way through Pontiac dealerships. It's a Fiero variant. Um, so yeah, I mean, my hope is that people will continue to appreciate them and see them as the special Fieros that they are, and not a Ferrari ripoff, but a very unique and
Yep.
special Fiero.
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. What
And
what
I
are
and I really
some?
appreciate the sentiment on that too, guys. I've felt very welcomed into the community, and it's just heartwarming to hear you guys say that as well. So thanks for the kind words, and I'm really looking forward to that show.
Yeah, it is like I said, it's, every show has their uniqueness. And I think the thing that makes Fiorama special too is it's one of the last shows of the season. And it as we then transition from cruise nights and car shows to um our our monthly Zoom meetings. It is also, I think, a way that people, say bye to their friends too. And it's like the last hurrah party that we put on. And I think that's why we also have good turnouts, because that's it's the last game, it's the World Series, the Super Bowl, and everybody says they come, they have fun, and they don't want to say goodbye, but they say goodbye until next year. And we see a lot of unique um things that come out Fiorama, and um, this is definitely a unique, very unique car that is going to be presented, and people are going to enjoy hearing the stories and stuff like that. So
Yeah, pretty good.
Well, can't wait. It's going to be great. Really can't wait.
yeah.
Me too.
So all right. Well, I hate to wrap it up, but um, again, a great story, great just knowledge of the Mira that we heard here tonight. And the Mark, thank you very much for joining. Drew, thank you very very much for joining us tonight, and just again just getting the information on the Mira, and just it's just very cool of one, just having the prototype, but also the research and things that you've learned over the years. It's not something that you're like, oh, it's just another car and boom, I'm going to go off and sell it again to make millions more dollars off it. You embraced it, and that's what I think is really cool is you got the car, and you started gaining all the history of what that car means. And that's what makes, again, the person in the car match together perfectly.
Absolutely. But that being said, you mentioned make millions of dollars off of it. If anyone listening wants to pay me $1 million for it, let's talk. I might be willing to sell for that. One other thing too, I'll say at the show is I do have a documentation book that I've brought to the 35th and the 40th. And I have a little video display, that runs off of batteries that I bring and set out that has that corporate concepts video that plays on loop. So if you're going to the show, definitely check out the display wherever I'll be. I'll have that process book where it's accessible and the little video playing. So you can kind of thumb through copies of all the documentation and see that history kind of come alive through the photos, the pictures, the letters, everything that I've been able to find to verify that car is the prototype.
Awesome. And I think that's really cool. All right. Well, again, thank you, Drew, very much for joining us tonight. I really appreciate it. And again, just the knowledge that you bring on and expanding my mind with the Mera is top notch. And Mark, thank you for joining us, co-hosting tonight. Appreciate it as well. And with that being said, we will see you, Drew, in less than what?
3 weeks.
3 weeks at Fiorama. Looking forward to it.
All right. Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Thank you again to Drew Monney and Mark Soldner for joining me tonight for this episode of Fiero Cast. I hope you enjoyed the newest episode of Fiero Cast and our chat about the Meras. So, this podcast was produced by GoldenEye Graphic and is a production of the Northern Illinois Fiero Enthusiasts. Thank you for joining me again tonight. I am your host, Mike Croyer, and thank you for listening to the newest episode of Fiero Cast. This is episode 54, and it is the only podcast dedicated to the Pontiac Fiero and the Fiero community. If you like more information or have ideas on future Fiero Cast, you can email me at mkroyer@fierofocus.com. Remember to keep Fieroing, and good night, Fiero owners, wherever you are.